there was a YC combination venture called Optify, which brought computer vision camera tracking of apparel employee workers.
Sure.
And what they did is they were obviously measuring output, and they were berating, they were able to berate team members for not producing at the rate at which they thought they should be producing.
Yeah.
So of course there was an incredible backlash to this, because it was like, okay, tech people not really even understanding the pressures of the garment industry. But the fact, and YC did withdraw that venture, but the question is, we talk a lot about guardrails, and we don't seem to be really reaching any kind of consensus as to what that looks like. Can you all comment on that?
Yeah, but I'll start with that. That's a very good question, because guardrails prevent your brand erosion. You got to look for your brand. You got to look for, words that may not be used on search. So Nemo, we have something called a Nemo framework that we use, and it has guardrails for input and output. When somebody asks questions which are like, hey, help me make a bomb on your website, right? And with your chatbot, you should be able to recognize that and say, hey, no, that's something that we don't do, you know? And same thing with output guardrails, right? And you talk about hallucinations, you want to make sure that it's in line with your brand, what the message you're trying to convey. So those are the guardrails from that perspective, from a technology perspective that we use, all on LLMs easily. So you got any, both of you?
Sure, I can talk more from what we do. I mean, guardrails are there even before we are starting a project. So our AI council, they literally review 30, 40 projects every month, and they themselves put those kind of guardrails. If I talk more about what kind of guardrails we are putting as an organization. Now coming to actually talking with LLMs, then of course we have, rather than opening up ChatGPT or Claude for internal consumption, we have set up our own LLM-based ecosystem, so that the respective guardrails are put in place, so that they don't ask something which might be confidential. They don't put something onto the internet which may cause to us later on. So we have put those kind of checks in place. And yeah, of course, having AI governance and data governance is fundamental and key, on which we are focusing a lot this year.
I'm going to take a slightly different approach to this, not tech at all. From a, you probably heard, a well-crafted problem statement is worth its weight in gold. And this comes down to something I said earlier. As a business, do you have a clear and compelling business strategy? So when I think about using AI inputs and outputs, what are the filters that you're putting on to ensure that the output is best for you, whether it's on brand? And I'll use Amazon as an example, because I think they've done this consistently well over many decades. They've prioritized speed to the consumer over everything. It's always a balance, cost, sustainability, speed to consumer. Everything is a delicate dance and balance. I lived in Portland, Oregon for a long time. I was with Nike, and there's the busiest at that time distribution center, Amazon distribution center in the world, was in Troutdale. I'm thinking it's about an hour east of Oregon, of Portland. It's kind of like, why is that there? And they talked to us about, the team took our executives through, and we did a tour from a supply chain standpoint, and they showed us this pack of 5 pencils. And they said, globally, every 3 minutes, we rebalance inventory. And our promise to the consumer is that we're going to have certain items to them in a certain amount of time. And this pack of pencils, we know we will lose money on it. Why? Because when we rebalance inventory, we might need to say, this pack of pencils needs to now go to Vegas. Why? So that it's properly positioned to then send to the next location, so that it can be to the customer within 2 days. So the guardrail here was speed to consumer, because that was the priority. So that was a guardrail that was placed on their business. So if it comes to how they incorporate AI in there, it has to solve for the speed factor. So I think that's a scenario where Amazon as a business had a clear guardrail from a business standpoint, which then could translate over into however they were using AI to balance inventory globally and whatnot. So slightly different take.
No, that's a good take from a business perspective, right? When you look at guardrails that people put in for LLMs, there's like 20 different things. They use judges, and then you have to evaluate those judges and make sure that they kind of respond correctly, that they meet your standards. So I'm working with a client right now which actually does that. They've used 20 different guardrails, and we're trying to help them distill LLM models to be able to do that. And then we have to learn all of that stuff. So, it can provide you the right answers. So.
I've got one other little example. This is kind of a funny one. So Nike, this is many years ago, kind of before AI was really, what it is today. And it used to be called Nike ID, and now it's Nike by You. And you could go on, and there were certain products online where you could kind of customize sneakers and put your initials and things like that. Well, it was just, it had text, and you could put in whatever you want. And we would literally sit there at our lunch break and try to break the model. And, we were just acting like dirty guys, and like, what can we put in here to break through the system? And whatever guardrails Nike was using at the time were very robust, because we could not get anything through to be printed on the back of these Nikes. That was very inappropriate.
That's good. Do you have anything else to add?
I can add, the topic for today is AI in retail, but I can take an example from healthcare, where you need to put in the right guardrails in place, and I think agents will play a very crucial role in this, in the near future. I'm working on a couple of, use cases around that, where we see that, okay, if a patient and a doctor have access to the same research data, the patient should not be able to access certain information which is beyond, their purview. Same goes for the doctors or practitioners, right? And if nurses or their offices are handling that same data, they should not have the kind of access which they are restricted to. And this goes outside the region also, right? Maybe in US, it's just the doctors who can order medicines or supplements on a patient's behalf. In India, anyone can do it from wherever they want. So putting in regional guardrails, putting the right kind of compliances in place, all those, in my opinion, would be governed by agentic AI in the future, where routers will be routing queries differently to different agents from where you'll be getting the answers.
Okay, does that help?
So I come from the sales side of the business, from a brand perspective. And we talked a lot today about how brands are working in a silo to utilize AI, and we talked about how retailers are working in a silo to utilize AI. Is there an example of where the brands and the retailers can partner together to utilize AI to?
Absolutely.
That would be great.
Absolutely, because a lot of the folks, like, if you have vendor managed inventory, you have, you want to share your product information with the your retail. Like, let me give you an example of Rachel's organization, right, which does share a tremendous amount of data with their suppliers, right? Walmart does. So, and that is a very critical thing for replenishment. That's a critical thing which drives a whole bunch of other processes. So for CPG companies, they don't have direct access to the data. They have to go to the retailer to figure out what the consumers are buying, right? So now you have the consumer data coming in from retailers, you have the retailer supply chain data, you marry the two, and you create like, hey, so can I automate some of this process? Can I build some intelligence into it? Can I make a decision engine part of it? That's where the AI comes into picture for both of them. Over.
Yeah, I might add on. I think that the easy answer is yes. Today, I don't see as many pure play brands and retailers, that operate in one or the other. I talked about Kirkland before. Costco's a retailer. Now they have their own brand. Target, same thing. When you look at some of their best performing brands, they're their own in-house brand. So most of these, especially the larger one, has access to both. An example where, and by the way, like working inside Nike, there was no clear demarcation when the retail division stopped and the brand began. So at least that was within Nike. It was sort of one massive machine. But where things got interesting was, Nike and many other brands also operate through wholesale partners. So if you look at Foot Locker or Dick's Sporting Goods or these other kind of multi-brand retailers that would sell a different brand's item, where I didn't see a lot of cooperation was, hey, if I'm Nike and I'm selling in Dick's, I actually want to know all about what Dick's sales transactions look like. Not just Nike, but who comes in and ends up buying Adidas or something else. And this is where the wholesale partner, the retailer, actually holds a lot of the power, right, and the leverage there. And me as a brand in that case, I would want more of that data than I think they'd be willing to share. So that's an area where I haven't seen as much cooperation because there is a bit of a tension there. But I think, yeah, as a brand, if I know more about what people are buying, maybe I've come out with a neon line of shoes and nobody's selling it because the pastel Adidas are selling hotter. Okay, I was wrong. I picked the wrong color palette, for that season, and I should have kind of been over here when I was over there. So things like that are things that you could learn and then bring better product to market at the right time.
So I'll add one more point to that. One of the biggest things most retailers are looking at right now is data monetization, right? How do I take the data that I have and I monetize it, provide insights to the CPG companies? And then the CPG companies want to do the same thing. They want to take the data and they want to execute on it. They want to know how my product functions against this competitive landscape for a particular category, right? So that's another place where people are looking at, because even advertising, right, at retail media networks where you want to serve advertising based on that, CPG companies look at that data and go, okay, let me target my audience, in this particular region, predominantly Hispanic, or this region, you have Italians, or, so you would actually take that and drive the retail media network, putting ads as well. So a lot of monetization, good question, a lot of monetization is being done in that area.
I think both of you have already summed up, and I'll just sum it up. Both of you have since already brought in those points, right? So we depend so heavily on retailers' data, right? Because majority of the business comes from in-store product selling. Now, e-com data is also coming up, right? Like you have Instacart and different ways of, through which people are buying. That might be a small portion for us, but then still we are heavily dependent on retailers' data. Now, talking about your point, competitor data or what consumers are actually buying or doing inside a store, right? That plays a very crucial role for us also to develop and identify where we should place our products well. Mm-hmm. So I think, in my opinion, the more data we get, the better things would be and better user experience or consumer experience, would be as we proceed further.
Good.
So I know so far, and this is, you have all said, and we have all said, that AI will not replace employees, that a person augmented by AI will. I also want to put the question back to you. Have you felt over the past few months, have you questioned some hiring decisions in your own companies of like, hey, well, maybe I don't need to bring someone else because I'm seeing the acceleration of my own productivity or my team's productivity? Have you felt like you've been at a position where you held back from expanding additional hiring? Or do you feel that you're just going after the incremental opportunities that you weren't able to go after before? What's the balance between those, the incremental opportunities? Yes, we'll bring this additional person that will help us go after this additional elements in our roadmap versus the, hey, maybe, we keep our existing priorities and our existing headcount.
Very good question, and it's also political football, right? Because it's all about jobs. I think a lot of the retailers that are using, even in my company, for instance, we use right up to from the CEO, Jensen Huang, all the way down. We were encouraged to use Perplexity. We were encouraged to use ChatGPT, everything. So they're going, hey, see how this enhances what you're doing. So what happens is, I'm driving, instead of getting something done in like 3 hours, I can get something done in 20 minutes. Like have it give me the main points, and then my experience brings, on top of that, and now I can have a unique view, which is my view, based on the standards that the ChatGPT or whoever comes up with, right? So from a jobs perspective, job loss perspective that you just talked about, right? It is going to happen. Certain categories it's going to happen because you saw today, like Microsoft laid off like 7,000 people, right? A lot of the coding that's happening, even in Google, in Microsoft, in Meta, 30% of the coding now is done by bots. So some of those jobs are going to go away, but they're going to have to be retooled because, hey, remember, AI is only as good as the data that it's trained on, right? So you have to keep it updated. You have to make sure that everything that comes down the pipeline works with it. So you'll still need people, you just need different kinds of skills, like the architects, the developers, not just the developers, the architects, people who are doing business analysis. So all of those.
Hi.
I mean, if I were to add, we are in fact in a hiring spree. The talent is not there in market, which suit our needs, in fact. So we are approaching lots of vendors, and they also are struggling to find the right talent for us, in my opinion. And talking about job loss, yes, of course, I think it's sad to see yesterday the news that came out from Microsoft, but in my opinion, everyone who's even sitting in this room needs to reskill themselves and move forward with the way or the fast pace in which tech is proceeding further. So all of us have to reskill.
I might just add one quick comment. I know we have another question, but I think I'll speak more generally. The answer is yes. There's part of this perfect storm that I talked about earlier. AI is one element, but with just tariffs and the broader economic challenges that we're all seeing and feeling, there's a lot more scrutiny. There's been a couple CEO internal memos that were leaked that were like, your ass better be using AI or else type of thing. And so whatever way you want to approach it, I mean, it's, to your point, we all need to reskill, upskill, think differently. And this is like the tagline, the takeaway for me is the greatest accelerant or bottleneck to our collective success is our human ability to create or imagine. That's it. It's not a technology or an AI problem. It's can you conceptualize and not even come up with a surgical prompt, which, yes, Deborah, I do. I spend a lot of time on my prompts. But can your brain even conceptualize and imagine where you might go so that you're asking AI to help you realize that vision? That's the bottleneck or the accelerant. So, yeah. Good point.
Is this working? Okay. I have a question about regulation. We're talking about all these great things that AI can do and will do, but there isn't a lot of talk about there's going to be bad actors out there. There always are. You think about things that they're going to do behind the scene, and it just feels right now that we're waiting for maybe something bad to happen to then address it or regulate it. So I'm just kind of curious, as you guys being experts in this space, and currently I believe this is self-regulated, what do you guys think about regulation and bad actors?
So from a regulation perspective, right, I mean, since it's a technology where the US has leadership, there is some reluctance to hold it back with regulation right now. So that's from a federal perspective. But now you also have what's known as sovereign AI. Countries themselves, like you heard from Saudi Arabia today, right? Entire countries are going to be investing in AI. So they will put together regulations. They are putting together regulations. You're going to have state level regulations.
Is that AI? AI did that.
Yeah, thanks. So there's going to be regulations no matter what, because it impacts society. That's such a huge change. There's your competitor literally is something that's been trained on all of the knowledge in the world. So you're going to have to figure out how human beings fit in that thing. What's my kid going to do? 5 years from now. So there are going to be regulations, but right now there's reluctance because we are ahead in a lot of these AI fields, and we don't want to hold companies back. So I do wish that the companies, some of them would be more conscientious about it, but it's coming. The regulations are coming.
I mean, even I am a firm believer that it should be responsible AI, and regulations should be enforced. I mean, countries are enforcing. I mean, especially if you see the European side of things, right? So probably other countries and regions should also impose those kind of regulations. I would say how people are also using it, the end users. I mean, of course, there are companies who are building the tech, that's different, but people who are consuming, now you literally have information in your phones, right, which you can tap on. So I think there have to be some guardrails around that as well as to what information should be flown to a persona, or based on the person who is accessing that tech. I mean, look at generative AI, right, through dark LLMs. People are able to generate images and videos like anything, right, and impersonate others. So I think different guardrails, even people who are developing tech or any kind of products also, they should enforce those kind of checks in place so that it's not, it doesn't harm people.
Look, we are already seeing issues. Bad things are already happening. I remember there was like an AI companion tool or a companion app, and this young teen kind of fell in love with this AI and sort of suggested to take his life, and the kid did. And it was a horrible outcome, and that's a kid's life. That is not responsible or ethical AI. And to answer your question, yes, like more bad shit's gonna have to happen before somebody steps up and says, okay, yes, progress and earn that next dollar of revenue, but at what cost? And right now, at least one life wasn't enough. So I think we're really far behind here in terms of what's the right way to approach this. Who are the adults in the room? Who's asking the hard question? This is like, we need a whole day to kind of talk about this one. And yeah, I think human nature is like, we look for path of least resistance. Doing it the right way is hard. And so we're gonna do it the easy way until something really bad happens or the economy collapses, and we're like, I guess we didn't do it the right way. I guess we need to go back and try this again. So unfortunately, that reactive nature is kind of human psychology.
Okay, one more question before we start.
Is there one more question, Bill, or are we? Oh yeah, okay.
I'm just going to skip the mic. So I work with companies outside of the U.S. and consumer packaged goods to bring them here to the States.
Sure.
But one thing we've noticed, especially with developing with AI and bias from working with smaller countries, or larger countries, depending on how you look at it. So I guess my question is, what are your thoughts about the work involved around removing bias in AI, so that way it helps investors see doing business in Nigeria, we'll just stick there, doing business with other companies in Nigeria, but then using AI to really help alleviate some of that bias, because as you said earlier, the data is only as good as whatever goes in, and it's skewed. I mean, when was it when we determined that the soap dispensers had a bias against darker palms, like it couldn't see it?
Correct.
So what are your thoughts on helping to remove the bias from AI to help some of those other businesses come over to the States, but we're programming them?
So again, the AI is only good as the people who put that data in there, right, and what it's looked at. So what we usually do now when we put it out in, say, Nigeria or other countries, is we fine-tune that data set, right? We make sure that there's enough views represented, enough, population sections that are used, that data is used. So that's the critical part. You can't just, go and toss the LLM out there. You got to be able to fine-tune it with your specific data. Then you got to be able to distill it to different sizes where it can be put in, any other use case. So that's a very good question, actually. In the US, however, that has kind of been derailed lately. So we'll see. I mean, I think we still need to have that conversation as a nation, right? So hopefully we will.
I think it's a beautiful question, and I think it fits absolutely in with the last topic around kind of ethical and responsible AI. Who are the adults in the room, and how are we asking the hard questions to say, hey, there's there's some unintended consequences or impacts here. How do we be aware of that? And actually, I don't think it's a tech problem. I think it's a human problem, because until we can start and just say, hey, there is bias, we all live with it because that's part of being human. There's unconscious bias. There also is explicit and conscious bias, which is not good and not okay. But until we, as just humans, can have that conversation and come to that collective awareness, only then can the humans that are building the tools start to bring that thinking in. So we're not there yet, and it's unfortunate. It's a big problem, and tying back to like how many people have to get hurt before we do something about it. And I think, look, it's capitalism, like tie it to dollars. Okay, you don't care about lives? Let's talk about how we're gonna hit your bank account, right? So it's more bad stuff has to happen before there's like collective action to get to the point of saying, this is something that we have to build into every single product that's built.
But a lot of companies like Campbell's, I mean, they are actually aware of that there is a problem, and they try to get the best data sets that they can. Want to talk about it?
I mean, see LLMs or Gen AI, they are trained on the entire internet's data. And it's us who have written that data, right? Ultimately, so bias is already fed into them. So trigger is already pulled. Now we are doing some course correction, right, to avoid any kind of biases. So I think because the training has already happened, like he said, fine tuning is one way of doing it. Maybe like we'll have to put some agents on top, who do those validation checks of biasness and, remove that piece. And because it will be again too much of a thing, right, to undo certain thing, right? Those wrappers have to be written properly I'm using a technical word here, but then companies or products, whoever are building them, you have to bring in those kind of shelves or wrappers on top of that, so that biasness is limited or suppressed to the extent that is possible.
All right. And so we are wrapping up our program. Thank you so much for being here. But let's give a hand for Manish, Nitin, and Greg.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.